Well, here we are, our second session for the Women in Retirement Education series. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on wherever you are in the world. I'm in Canberra. It's a rainy afternoon, but it's not going to deter us in any way. Please let me start off with an acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people, the traditional custodians of the land upon which I'm going to be facilitating today's session. And I'd also like to invite you to just type in the chat wherever you're joining from. I know a couple of people are in Queensland. There's a couple of local people here in the ACT. Wherever you are, just drop a line in the chat to give us an indication of where you're at. I'd also just like to remind you to please unmute your mics. I think everyone is unmuted, unless you have a question or something you'd like to share, because what happens if more than one mic is unmuted, then it causes interference and also interferes with the quality of the recording. And if you have devices and you're also unmute for whatever reason, please just remember to put your devices on silent. Before we kick things off, I also just, want to just provide a reminder of the context behind this whole thing, that the Women in Retirement Education series is all about financial empowerment, debunking, demystifying, simplifying conversations around money, which we know can be so unbelievably uncomfortable. But we also know that burying our head in the sands isn't going to make the problem go away. So this is a safe space for us to talk about, some of the pertinent issues that we're dealing with, whether it's the cost of living crisis, how to budget, how to even tackle this mammoth of a mountain called retirement. And so the person who's going to be presenting today's session, I am so excited with. I borderline have an unhealthy obsession with, maybe I shouldn't be saying that. I've been following the one, the only Dr. Tracy West's work from a distance for years now. Funny enough, I actually ordered, I had ordered the financial literacy book that you had a chapter contribution in. And here we are. Like, Tracy does some amazing work in the space of financial education, behavioral finance, and also just general advocacy around empowering those who are marginalized, younger people, older people, women, to tackle their finances and find strategies or pathways for economic security. And so Tracy's presentation today is going to be around, and really it's not a presentation, I suppose let's call it a conversation, is going to be around managing the longevity bonus. And I'm really keen to see how Tracy tackles this and the angle that she chooses to take on. Please feel free to type in your comments, your thoughts, if there's anything you want to ask while we're going along. The whole point of this is that, like, it's not supposed to be a lecture. I want this to be a dynamic, robust, and engaging conversation that we can all participate in. So without further ado, Tracy, I'd like to hand over to you, and we really look forward to hearing, how do we actually manage the longevity bonus?
Thank you, Bomakazi, and welcome to everybody today. And I look forward to seeing how I tackle this today. It's actually not an easy topic, but I thought it sat well in between Trisha's topic in the first webinar and Rebecca's topic in the third webinar. So let's get on with it. And hi to people I know and people I haven't met before. And thanks for typing in your country on which you work and live in the chat. And I'd like to tell you that I come from the beautiful land of the Kumba people and pay my respects to all First Peoples and celebrate their enduring connections to country. So a little bit about me, and oh my gosh, I'm blushing. Bomakazi, that's so nice. And kudos to you too, you're doing amazing things. So I am now working with a foundation, a charity that does a lot of grants making to not-for-profits that have financial wellbeing programs in community. And recently they developed a financial literacy program in schools, so I manage that program. So I'm really excited to match my passion for financial literacy and research with actual work in action, I suppose, and helping our young people in schools. So before that, I was a university lecturer and researcher in financial literacy, and my areas were behavioral finance and finance in general. So I'd really like to thank Bomakazi for inviting me to talk to you today. And I'm really grateful to be included in a series of workshops with Trish Gregory. Hi, Trish, and Rebecca Glenn. So today it is a conversation. Please interrupt me at any time, ask questions. We'll stop and chat about it. I'm going to give you chances to answer some questions and interact a little bit. And of course, usual disclaimer, it's general advice. I'm not a financial advisor and I can't give you specific advice. So unfortunately, we won't be talking about superannuation and annuities and drawdowns and all that sort of thing, which is really useful. But I think part of my session today is to give you support and where you need to go for information to help inform your own personal circumstances. I also want to say that talking about money can be very difficult. We all have different experiences. We all have different backgrounds and journeys when it comes to money in our financial situations. And I fully appreciate that this can be very stressful. And I applaud all of you today for seeking out more information in this presentation series. So what we're all working on is our happiness project and how can we make our financial situation work to live happy lives. And we've done housekeeping. So also, if you have a pen and paper handy and another device or your computer, I am going to ask you to interact in this interactive quiz with us and answer some questions. So get your pen and paper handy and your phone or connect to the internet. Okay. All right. So now that you've heard about me, now let's think about ourselves. And I want to take a few minutes to reflect on our own lives and how we think and feel about money. So what is your money story? And on that pen and paper, perhaps you want to write down a few keywords that describe what you remember about money growing up. How you feel about money. And that can be, what words come to mind? Do you always wish you had more money? Do you think money would solve your problems? Do you want more money for status reasons to keep up with your peers? Do you think people with lots of money are selfish? Like, what do you think about people with money? Do you waste money? Do you feel like you waste money? Do you think that other people waste money? Just click this timer. I'm going to give us a couple of minutes, not 5, but I didn't know how to put in a timer that was, no. Maybe I can't do it in here. Anyway, we'll have a few minutes for you to write down some words. And lastly, what are some good things about managing money? What are some good skills that you have? Do you manage a very tight budget? Are you creative with your meals so that you spend less on groceries? Do you save regularly? Maybe give me a thumbs up if you're ready to written some things down and you want to move on. Okay, a few thumbs up coming through. Okay. So we might do a bit of sharing next. So this is an interactive poll. Now maybe I need to click another button. Hang on. Maybe not that button. Well, to join the poll, give me a second. I'll give you some instructions. Sorry, it's meant to give you instructions at the top there, but you can see at the bottom. Always the way, isn't it? Actually, if we're not joined live, could have tested this. Hey, Anyway, that isn't working. 2 seconds. We can do this.
Well, maybe I'll jump in there and get the conversation going while you're figuring out what you figure out. I know your first question was growing up, some of your thoughts or attitudes around money. One of the things I always heard, I suppose, you know, my greatest source of financial socialization was my parents. And hearing their discourse and you know, like attitudes towards money, I constantly heard money doesn't grow on trees. Whenever I wanted something, it was money doesn't grow on trees. So I suppose there was a lot of unlearning I had to do to move from the attitude of scarcity, deprivation to now learning how to manage it and not live life through that lens.
Thanks, Bumi. Yes, so in the chat now, I have put the link that you can join the poll on if using in your web browser, or if you're sending a text message, you send the message and the phone number is +61 480 025 509. And in that message, you type Tracy West 741. So that will connect you to the poll, and then you can answer the questions. And then the questions will come through live. So this is a word cloud. So we'll all get to see each other's responses to how you feel about money. So I'm going to join with you just to make sure it's all working. It does take a few minutes to get set up, but we're going to do a few questions later. So once you're joined, that will be handy. Yay, you guys have done it. All right. Yes, thanks, Trish. Now, this is the problem. It's not live. I might have to duck out of sharing this way and reconnect. So hang on. So you can see that now? Can you see my screen? Yeah. Okay, so sorry. Yes, I will get my act together. So you can see now the feelings that people associate with money are peace, freedom, opportunity, feelings, essential money. So it's lots of words there. Actually, it's stability. I like that. So sometimes you can get a lot of negative feeling words, scared, scarcity, stress, anxiety. But my audience today is really positive and excited to be managing the money. So I really like that. But I think we need to appreciate there is a breadth across feelings associated with money, and through different times in our lives, we may feel differently. All right. Thanks everyone for bearing with me. Okay, so my first takeaway for today is to know yourself. So reflect on what money means to you, how you might feel, why you might feel that way, your childhood, relationships, and money, money in the workplace and career choices, and children, how children impacts your relationship to money, and then how you feel about passing on your wisdom and having conversations with your children about money and what you want their experience to be that might be different to the experience that you had. What pressures are you under? Where they're coming from? What do you need to know more about? And how do you feel about the process of learning more to improve your financial situation, or learning more about yourself and connecting to perhaps some of those feelings with childhood and the abundance of money, or perhaps the lack of money and what that meant for you growing up? I also recommend you try this Klontz Money Script Inventory Quiz. So that is a short quiz that will ask you a series of questions, and it will generate a report for you on how um, on some, well, four money scripts, they call them, and how you're associated with money. So it can be money avoidance, money worship. There are some categories that these researchers have come up to, and they answer some questions. They funnel into four categories, which are money avoidance, money worship, money status, and money vigilance. And I put a little copy of my report here just to give you an overview. And so it's a really good exercise for you to do. And you can see, and it gives you some scores. So scores range from 1 to 6. And if you have a score over 4, then that money script is something that is highly associated with you. Less than 3, then you don't have such a high association, and then between 3 to 4 is medium. So it's really interesting. And money avoidance is these ideas that money, you don't deserve money. And it's really interesting. So it's the belief that money is bad and that you don't deserve money and you feel guilty about having money and all those sorts of things. And so then it gives you some suggestions on how you can help moderate that. So yeah, really interesting. And I encourage you to have a go. Has anybody done that before? I heard of the Klontz money scripts.
That's so interesting. I was actually just about to ask what money avoidance is. Because I mean you can sort of, figure out the rest, focus, status, vigilance.
Yeah.
But I think that's a really like useful tool to just unpack what your attitudes are towards money. I think I would be the opposite of avoidance. I try my best to attract it, although I fail.
Yeah, no, exactly. So that is, so all these things, all your beliefs and attitudes can come from childhood and how you experience that growing up, and you develop these attitudes to money. And so money avoidance can mean you don't deserve it. Maybe I've had experiences of that in childhood. And so the corrective action is to come up with some mantras or affirmations about how you do deserve money and you welcome it into your life, and that if you can find purposes for good, then you can use that money to funnel it in. And so it's a way of correcting your emotional biases and maybe some cognitive biases going on there as well. So yeah, it's really useful, I think, to spend some time on that, understanding yourself. So that's our first lesson for today. And I think something to take away and do is have a bit of reflection on yourself and what money means to you, and thinking about retirement then. Um, how much do you need? What do you need it for? What's your purpose? I suppose is connecting to the bigger issue. All right. So again, using your text messaging, I want I want you to try and answer these questions, and then we'll do a few, and then I'll tell you why and the connection after we've done a couple. So, on average in Australia, how long will a 65-year-old woman live? About 15 more years, 20 more years, 25 more years, or you don't know? And with your pen and paper, maybe keep track of how many you get correct. There's only 3 of them. All right, and most of you had a go. So the correct answer is the second one, around another 20 more years. So the average life expectancy of Australian women is 85.4. Right, let's do the next one. And nobody selected they don't know. So that's good and interesting. On average in Australia, how long will a 65-year-old man live? Very good. Okay, so yes, the second one is correct again, around 16 more years. So the average life expectancy is 81.3 for an Australian male. About this one. On average, how long will the 65-year-old First Nations woman live? Then it's a bit trickier. So again, and I didn't write these questions. The second one is the correct one. So it's 75.6 years on average for a woman, a First Nations woman. It's 75, yeah, 71.6 years for a First Nations man. So the gap for them, it's about nine years between Australians as broadly defined on average and First Nations peoples. All right, so why? How did you go? How many correct responses did you get? Maybe type in the chat your number out of 3. So you might be interested to know when you're doing that. Australia has the 3rd highest life expectancy in the world. Monaco and Japan have higher life expectancies than Australia. Our male life expectancy is ranked 2nd in the world, and females are 5th in the world. Now, what does this mean? So longevity. Longevity is the basis for planning for retirement, and you should have an idea of how long retirement is going to last. And those questions came from a recent study in America showing that 53% of the people surveyed did not have an idea. They picked, I don't know, for average American life expectancies of men and women. So 53% didn't know. So here today, we have a very informed audience, as Bamikaze says. But when we look at the wider population, many people are not paying attention to this. So they don't know how long they might live for. Don't know what the average probabilities are. Another proportion, 25% of respondents underestimated it. So instead of picking the 17 years, they picked, 10 years. Right? So when you're planning how much money you need to save, then you need to save less money to live for less years. And so that's very problematic if you live for more years than if you reach the average or you exceed the average life expectancy. So getting it wrong or not knowing and underestimating it is very problematic for preparing for retirement. People who get it about right or who are overestimating, say planning to live to age 90 or beyond, then they are usually well prepared. They have really good savings behaviors. They are planning, they're thinking about it. They are getting advice, they are seeking information. All right. So underestimating it and don't knowing is very problematic. Now, what this study was really surprised about is that women got these questions more correct than men did more often. So women, for some reason, are really attentive to how long we might live for and understand the challenge, I suppose, more succinctly than men might. So what does that mean for you? Well, that means that women can see the challenge ahead of them. And despite some of the other challenges we have, which I get to later, understand that they need a lot of money, or they're better prepared to, I suppose, spread their spendings across retirement because they understand they might live for longer. Men, on the other hand, may not be thinking about it or may not be so prepared. And when you're living in a couple household, then that brings about some challenges, doesn't it? If you're not on the same page and not preparing in the same way. But that is, this study pointed out this knowledge difference because when we ask other questions about financial concepts like on interest, compound interest, diversification, etc., these sets of questions that we ask to test financial knowledge, women consistently don't do very well on those questions compared to men. So it seems like men understand concepts, financial concepts, familiar with the words, know what they mean, whereas women lack confidence or knowledge, but I suspect it's more about confidence in answering these questions, and we tend to respond with, I don't know, more than men do. There's a real disparity there. So I'll talk about knowledge a bit later on, though. But maybe in the chat, what's your experience with thinking about this issue and planning for retirement? You were all very well aware, got this pretty good accuracy with those questions. So have you thought about this before? What has made you think about this before? Is it, are we the sandwich generation caring for our aging parents as well as our children? And so we're observing our aging parents. Are we making decisions about healthcare needs and then thinking about our own healthcare needs as we age more than our male partners are, perhaps? So maybe type in the chat or feel free to come on the camera and share if you have any ideas there, because the researchers were at a bit of a loss. They need to do some more research to explain this difference between men and women. But perhaps there are things anecdotally that we know for women's, I don't know, different dispositions, I suppose, of paying attention to these issues.
I'm
I'm
just
all
looking at
agreeing.
Trisha's. Yeah, I'm same WhatsApp group. 100%. I want to live long. And if I want to live long, obviously, I really want my money to live long too. And that then for me would be the greatest driver of why I pay a little bit more attention. Well, I need to pay more attention because of the fact that I want to live long. And like Trish said, we work so hard and we're constantly hustling and grinding and saving and like just trying to keep afloat. And I would want, if I imagine my retirement years, I not only want to be healthy, but I also want to have the resources to live the kind of life I want to live. I don't want to be confined with money. Like money mustn't be the reason why I have deprivation or I'm restricted in terms of the kind of life I want to live.
Perfect. All the granny, it's something I'm gonna, yeah. All right. So this is the longevity bonus, and as you say, Bomakazi, it is a blessing and it's a challenge. So if we look back over history, our grandparents lived less longer lives than we're going to live on average. So we have been blessed with this longevity bonus, the increase in life expectancy. So often it's an emotional topic because we're thinking about the end of life and then how we're going to live. But we've been afforded this great privilege. So now we need to think about how we're going to use that privilege and how we are going to make money and make it last. So in terms of Bomakazi's thoughts on that, it is, well, how much money do we need? Do we need to think about working longer and what is that going to look like for us? So if you have money, then you have choices. If you have less money or a moderate amount of money, that becomes very challenging how to extend it and knowing how to spend, how much to spend each year in retirement, how much to save for those health challenges and perhaps moving or paying for care. I have heard a finance professor say, if you think saving for retirement is difficult and challenging, wait till you're deciding how to spend money in retirement, right? Because you just don't know how much you're going to need going forward for those unforeseen, unexpected events. But there are some things you can anticipate happening. And so if we think about that earlier, we can better plan for it. So do we need to work longer? Is that going to be part of our plan? What type of job might that be? Do we need to invest in our human capital now, our skills and abilities, to better prepare for a changing workforce and the changing needs of the workforce? Is the job that we're doing now something that we can do into old age, or do we need to plan for a transition to a different kind of role? So human capital is definitely part of the story and thinking about what are your options. And if you have an unforeseen financial shock, before your retirement or around that time, what's your backup plan? And working for longer might be one of those, but what might that look like? So that is part of this story. Also, what are you going to do in that time to fulfill your purpose? So around that older aging, we transition from caring for our children and our immediate families, and we think about what is our purpose, what are we going to give back. So we think about helping raise grandchildren or being involved in their lives. We think about how we're going to give back to the community. So volunteering might be something that you're engaged in as well that helps with that transition away from work into retirement. So it is a purpose, which may also involve work. So that should be part of the options that you keep on the table, and thinking about that early can help think about your human capital and what you might need to do there to keep that option open. So most people have never heard of this longevity bonus or longevity risk out in the wider community, perhaps not this audience today, but preparing for retirement and thinking about how long it's going to last is really key to motivating savings and planning. So that's our second takeaway, is work out your time horizon. So around age 85 for women, life expectancy for average Australian man is around 81.3. But you might have got an asterisk there, so you might want to add on some extra years there for your planning, or adjust that if you have genetic issues of, medical conditions in the family. Yes, so go the longer you plan for, the better off you'll be. Start looking for information on your options and choices. Subscribe to media sites and newsletters. Money Smart is your best source of independent financial information to get you started on. So start clicking through those sites, that get active and get organized with learning about your wealth, the interactions with the pension, your family home, and the options that you might have, and how withdrawals or changes might affect your circumstances. So get organized. Now, if you do live in a couple household and you're not the one that usually takes care of financial decisions, start to think about what might happen then. So when we're thinking about different life expectancies of men and women, it may be that the person that usually takes care of things passes on earlier and then you are left with a bit of a financial shock, trying to work out passwords, access to things, what you're subscribed to, all of those sorts of things, and how the bills are paid. So if you don't usually do those tasks, then start to get involved in financial decision making in the home and where information is kept. So get organized earlier than you need to. So there's a very strong connection between that longevity literacy and retirement preparedness. Now, related to all of these conversations is health. Health is going to be a very important factor in retirement. Many people will, and we will, develop physical issues, chronic illnesses, mental health struggles, the whole gamut is potentially going to affect us. So that does have an impact on your time horizon and your financial expenditure. One spouse outliving the other is another important factor to get organized about. So we should be thinking about that. And what's going to happen if your husband passes away or you pass away before your husband does, or, vice versa. The life insurance policies and all that plays a good part there. And I'm not a financial advisor, but these things are the things you need to read up on. Any genetics, family history. So if you're a First Nations person, which is something I think we all need to be aware of, they're 45% more likely to die from cancer. So, how does that factor into your planning? And all this goes to your well-being. So health and wealth go hand in hand. So if you're under control with your finances and what's going to happen, then that will contribute to your mental health and your well-being. There are many studies, so I draw attention as well to all the latest surveys that show many Australians are under increasing financial distress, which is taking a toll on their mental health. Also, having mental health challenges can cause financial issues with your ability to work and engage in all different activities. So, your health and your wealth are very connected. Um, Anything else anyone want to add in there or ask any questions about? It might be helpful to think about timelines for health, thinking about when you might want to downsize and get a more manageable place, like just thinking about planning for aged care and carers' needs and all of that earlier on. Building
I
emergency
think,
savings. Yeah.
not to monopolize the conversation. I just get excited on this topic. Please, you'll have to forgive me. I think I really need to take that quiz, Tracy. Because I'm just thinking bigger. You know, people talk about downsizing. I'm like, I want a bigger life. I want bigger access, bigger opportunities, like a fuller life. But whether the finances will allow for that, that's a separate conversation.
Well,
You know, so
that's all very possible. A big life, if we manifest that in terms of a nice big house, that can generate income for you if that's what you need at that time of your life. You could live downstairs while the rest of your family lives upstairs. There's all different cultural preferences, intergenerational living, like that can work for you. So it's thinking about
that's all now. No, I don't want to know now.
it's thinking about the distant future is going to be very different to what you think now,
No, that's right. I see there's
to
a
how
hand
you
up.
live and think now, and your ability physically to do things and mentally, your mental cognition, physical cognition.
And that's why, like, that's right. You know, that what you were saying about, health and wealth being so deeply connected resonated with me. Because my money attitude is that money is a resource, right? Like it's there to help you live the kind of life you want to live, get where you need to get. And I'm thinking, listen, if I'm not in shape by the time I'm 60, I have to have a fantastic plastic surgeon who's just gonna like suck in what they need to suck in and suck out what they need to suck out to make me live longer.
Welcome to the 40s. Yes, but that's all very expensive. So, yes. And you see, so that's social pressure as well, right? We see that all around us. I live on the Gold Coast right now, and there's very big eyelashes and very big lips, and a lot of Botox and fillers, right? But that every time I see that, and it's coming through the girls in the school now as well, especially with the eyelashes and the nails. Every time I see that, I think, well, how much money do you earn to be able to sustain that? It's very expensive. So I hope you, I hope, I, I hope you get there, and I will wish that for you. But you need, yes, you need to balance up what you need and want and makes you feel good with your financial circumstances. Having choices is the biggest thing, as Trish says. And that's what I think about money. Money gives me choices. And when you don't have money, you don't have many choices. And you have to keep going to the job that you don't like doing, and you have to keep doing the things that you don't like doing because you're locked in. Now, Pavinda had a question. Yes, please.
Thanks, guys. Just a quick one. How do you cater for inflation and the cost of living expenses that, they're going to just keep on going up down 20 years, 30 years? How do you cater for all those and all those unexpected, costs, medical or all those unexpected things that might happen? I mean, what I've been doing is I've just been tracking, say, okay, yep, my cost of living now is about, 50,000, 60,000 a year. Down the track, it's not going to be the same. How do you cater for that in planning, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And it's the perennial challenge. So things are going to cost more than what they do now. If we look at rental prices and house property prices, the rises in the last couple of years have been extraordinary. And what's that going to look like 20 years down the track? I don't know, and nobody has a crystal ball. We have to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Now, I'm not a financial advisor, so I have to be tricky, but one thing, and there are social welfare things that I also think about when it comes to the role of the family home and housing and investment properties and people that can't get into the property market, and all those things happen with investment properties. But you need to think about retirement incomes that are inflation adjusted, which rent might be one of those options. And you need to think about investments with higher risk tolerance to give you the higher returns. But you have to full well know your risk tolerance, your ability to take risk, your capacity to take risk, and your investment time horizon to be able to make those decisions. And I recommend you seek advice. But they're the things that you need to think about. So it's not something that I can give any more information on here, just because of the limitations we have. But you're thinking the right way. So if you know about it and you're thinking about it early, you can make the decisions to put you in the best state possible.
Can I jump in there with a question, and not necessarily for you, Tracy, just for everyone? I feel that there's so many lessons we could be learning from all the older adults around us, those who are close to retirement age, after retirement, in terms of things that they've done that they could have done differently, like lessons, reflections that they could be sharing. But I wonder why we don't hold more of those conversations. Who better to hear this kind of thing than straight from the horse's mouth? And so I think there's just such a missed opportunity for us just collectively to engage in those conversations, because I think about, the older people in my life, and you never hear them talking about money, but the kind of wisdom that they could be sharing could literally change someone else's life going in.
I totally agree with you, and I'm getting onto that topic very soon. It's like you read my mind. So we'll just wrap this one up. The third takeaway is thinking about your health and planning for your health needs. Start putting your emergency savings together. $1 a day makes a big difference, more if you can. Invest in your health. So whatever that means for you, it might be mental health and getting financial counseling and the help you need. It might be physical health, keeping fit and walking. It's really important you do that early and keep that going. My next one is a bit on financial knowledge. I'll just touch on this real briefly. So I mentioned human capital earlier in regards to thinking about working longer and work decisions and workplace skills. It's also really important to think about investing in your financial knowledge, especially thinking to the women that we know in our circles of friends that might not be paying attention to this. It's really important that, so along Bwami Kazi's lines is, if we know things, perhaps we should share it with people that we know, and not in a lecture style way, but in a casual social way. So if we know things, I think we have an obligation to share things about financial concepts and strategies and start the conversation in our social groups. If you're not sure of things and lack some confidence, then it's time to start finding out. So the Money Smart website's really good. Start subscribing to some podcasts maybe to get your foot in the door. ATO website, all those websites are really great to just hunt around and spend 5 minutes now and then having a look. But for women, because I was just targeting this session at women a little bit more, sometimes it's not so much about knowledge, it's more about confidence and having those money conversations. So perhaps our mothers haven't talked to us about money because, well, there is a societal taboo. But as well as that, a lot of money things are related to math abilities and skills and math confidence. So compound interest, working out strategies and things. There's a lot of maths underlying those things. And many women go, numbers, I can't do it. And I really hate hearing that. I really hate it when I hear radio hosts and things say it publicly, because it reinforces the stereotype with our girls and our young ladies. So we can do maths. We need to slow down and find some tools and use what tools we know how to do it. We can do it. So it's about confidence, and all of that has to do in our knowledge of money and our willingness to make financial decisions in the household is all related to the gender pay gap and how much we earn. Practice makes perfect. If you're not practicing, then you're not perfecting or having opportunities to do things. Education. In Australia, our women's education is quite high, but we do tend to funnel into careers that are feminized, like nursing and teaching, so that can have its own echo chambers, I suppose, and then less STEM related. Socialization, so how our mothers have spoken to us growing up is really important, whether they have included us in conversations or they haven't, in their attitudes. And then, the parents, how they spoke to us as children. So there are studies on the use of pocket money and how boys tend to get paid more pocket money than girls do, and girls are expected to do more in the home. And then those stereotypes are perpetuated in schools sometimes with how schools are structured and set up. And there's a lot more being done these days, right, to funnel girls into more maths and STEM classes. But still, our generation is in between those generations where money was taboo and women did certain things, and our generation is kind of the sandwich one in the middle. Risk aversion. So women tend to be risk averse in many contexts, including taking financial risks. So we need to encourage more women to try investing on the share market and taking some calculated risk or educated risks. Men tend to be overconfident. So there are studies that show that men tend to take on the financial decision making in the home, but the women can test better. When we test both the men and the women, they test better. It's just the men are more confident and sometimes overconfident. So a couple dynamics, and Rebecca might talk a bit more about negative couple dynamics in your next section with economic abuse and divorce. So women, so there are increasing numbers of divorce, of course. Women are less likely to get remarried than men, which can leave those single women, sometimes they're lone parents, in worse financial situations. And we know there is a societal issue with more single women entering poverty in their later years, which is a societal failure of supporting those women and understanding what dynamics are going on there in economic abuse at the end. So lots of things there about financial knowledge, but it's complex, societal structures, but having the conversation is important. Encouraging women and finding positive ways to boost them is important. Anything you want to add there? Anybody? Is that new information to anybody? Some of those things?
Before I, like, this slide really makes me hyperventilate, Tracy. Like, when we sit and think about how disadvantaged women are and how it all comes together to create the perfect storm in poor retirement outcomes, I think perhaps we've gotten to the point where we've normalized it, where it's, it's one of those, it is what it is. But like you're saying, some of the simplest strategies is just to simply share knowledge, talk about what you know, what you've done, how you've done it, or just say, hey, go speak to someone. You don't have to suffer alone. And I think this actually goes back to the quiz, because we read a lot about the studies that say women are less confident when it comes to investing and money management, etc. But it could go back to just those money attitudes that if I don't earn enough, who am I to think that I know how to manage money? Or if I don't have high levels of education, what do I know? So you become an imposter in your own situation when in fact your life experience makes you an expert on what you do know. Like, if you're living on a budget or a grocery budget of like $50 a week, you're a freaking expert, because how do you do that? And even that information is powerful. So I'm having a bit of a full circle moment, I suppose, and going back to that quiz you were talking about, because I suppose if you don't have the vocabulary, you really can't diagnose what exactly the issue is, and it becomes that much harder to unpack the steps forward you need to take to correcting some of those attitudes.
Absolutely. And that's why in the reflection piece, the third point is, what are you good at? Because I'm a bit sick of telling women that they underperform in these financial literacy tests. I mean, it's true that it's a fact that when we ask those questions, we do, but are those questions fair? Are they a good representation of all of the money skills and knowledge? But the fact still remains, we do need women to understand the impact of inflation on our money. We do need to understand the benefits of compounding, as Trish talked about last seminar, and diversification, not all your eggs in one basket. And there are three key things that if we can just talk a little bit more about that, will raise understanding and anything that can motivate investing, I think, and getting in the game for women is good because, you know, we get less superannuation. There are more older women entering poverty in retirement than at any other time. So it's a bit of a sandwich generation and there's a bit of policy catch up to happen. We're seeing a bit of movement now on childcare and other things that enable women in the workforce. And the next generation will be better off than we are, but we're stuck in between the feminist movement and needing to do and wanting to do everything and be everywhere. So as he said, sharing information, finding out, having these seminars, Bomikazi, is really important. I will fast forward. So our takeaway for today, fourth takeaway is financial knowledge, read more about it. Scamwatch, I haven't mentioned scams, but keep informed of scams. Maybe we can outsmart everyone else if we are not taken by scams, which is really important as we age. And the ASX share market site has some good resources on the education center. So my last point is about your connections, as Bomikazi mentioned earlier. So social connections and friends and family, really important in older age. Staying connected can help prevent economic abuse and financial abuse, which usually occurs by your adult children, by the way, but it also can occur by health professionals or anyone that has access to your bank accounts and things. But staying connected can help prevent abuse. But as well as we work, as our children grow up and we're not involved in the parent-teacher associations or we finish up with work, it can be harder to stay connected. So thinking about how we do maintain relationships is really good. It might be volunteering, it might be joining craft clubs or whatever, some kind of clubs, which can help improve our cognitive health and maintain our physical health as well. So there's many good reasons to think about how we're going to remain connected to society after we leave work. So that it can be a difficult phase. And along Bomikazi's lines, it's, well, what about our families and having conversations with our families? How are we going to do differently to our experience growing up? So are we going to be really open with our sons and daughters or aunts and uncles about our money and how we're going to spend it and how much we have? And what about this idea of a family bank? So a family bank, so if you're really rich, like they have family offices, right? And it is this trust and things that are set up to help manage your family. I'm not talking about that kind of level because those people are over there. But for us, if we're looking at intergenerational wealth transfer, if we're looking at solving problems as we age where our sons and daughters have difficulty getting into housing, we might be lucky enough to have a house, but we need cash. You know, can conversations be had that mutually benefit both parties with the proviso that you seek legal advice and financial advice and you have your own advice, independent advice sought So you do have to draw these things up because things can turn ugly. And if you have dysfunctional relationships, don't do it. But is there is it worth thinking about and at least starting conversations so that you're more open with your children about the issues so they can learn from you and share your wisdom. You can share your wisdom and your challenges and just be really honest.
Tracy, can I jump
like,
in there?
yeah.
I've never heard of this family bank concept. Could you explain that to me?
Well, so as I said, like rich people have this formalized, they have trust and things.
Right.
But for us lay people, can we borrow the idea and think about the assets that we have and our needs for cash and liquidity? And is there any mutually beneficial arrangement that can be made? Because sometimes you might, so as we come towards this period where houses are really expensive to get into, a lot of economic abuse occurs because older children are under financial hardship. And so they have inheritance impatience. And so they want their inheritance early, and they are not nice to their parents in the process. And there are some awful things that happen. But with this, you want to prevent that, and you don't want to do that. But is there something? So there are, what are they called? The mortgage drawdowns, negative gear, products that you can get now. Other things, is there anything that can help the situation to provide something that's mutually beneficial? I'm just putting that out there. There's the granny flats. There is the granny flat right, which is where you have a right to live in the house that your children might live in. There are things out there. So is that something to think about and have conversations about? But any doubts at all, don't go down that path. But keeping connected is really important. Friends and family, it's really important for our older age. Okay, so to wrap up quickly today, we talked about wealth and health and those relationships and how keeping social connections is really, really important. So plan for all these things, be motivated to think ahead early and how you're going to manage that privilege that we have to live longer and do more in our lives. So I'll end it there. Thank you so much for your participation in this workshop and the workshop series. I wish you all the best on your journeys, and over to you, Bomikazi.
Where do I start? Tracy, thank you so much for taking the time to present to us. I really am of the school of thought that when we share knowledge and we make it accessible and inclusive and easily digestible, amazing things happen. I know for one, I have so many key takeaways that I could extract from this. I have my book of notes that, for instance, the reimagining how we can take formalized and exclusive financial structures like trusts, and to revisit what that could look like from the perspective of the average Joe. So that was something that, I'm taking as an opportunity to interrogate my assumed knowledge of what's exclusive and unavailable for me, and thinking about, again, how I can empower those around me with what I have. Because my biggest thing is sharing knowledge and sharing information. And so thank you for sharing that quiz. I'm definitely going to be taking it. And to just invite everyone to think about some of the corrective actions that they can take in terms of their attitude towards money, how they plan for their retirement, and just, what does actually retirement even mean to you? I sometimes wonder, do we need to retire the word retire? Because the way in which we perceive it has shifted so drastically over the past 15, 20 years that we're seeing a lot of people who want to work, not necessarily out of circumstance, but enjoy that and want to live longer working lives as well. And so perhaps do we need to also just to reimagine some of the connotations that come with the word retirement? I look at my parents, for example, they're still working and they're 73. I did though, I must disclose, I did tell them to never retire. I don't have the money to just keep working. But I'm glad that they're in a position where they keep working because they love the kind of work that they're in. And that's something so important that you touched on now. Do we need to invest in the skill set that is going to enable us to be in demand later in life, so that if we are compelled to work, we're working in the right kind of job and we're doing things that stimulate us. And so we really shouldn't underestimate how long we're going to live as well. And that's a key consideration. And thank you everyone for attending this session. Please make sure you share what you know with those around you. I really want these sessions to have a legacy in the sense that we speak to our communities, we speak to those around us, we debunk, we demystify, conversations around money, and that this idea that retirement is so far away and we can afford to not think about it is long gone. We literally cannot afford to entertain that level of thinking anymore because we know what the outcome could be, and it's not cute. So this recording is going to be available on YouTube. I'm also going to post it on my LinkedIn page. Feel free to share it, forward it to everyone around you to start listening to it. I do want to remind everyone as well that there is one more session coming up this year on the 6th of December. Please register for that. Tracy had talked about economic abuse and, negative household dynamics and how that can affect your finances. So the intention behind that session that's going to be on the 6th of December is, how do we disentangle our finances from relationships? What happens when, the lines get blurred and the water becomes murky? And how do we find pathways to empower ourselves? And that's really what this is all about. It's really about educating, empowering, and making a difference, not just to ourselves, but to those around us. Have a fantastic afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for joining me. Don't forget to register for our last session, and I hope to see you then again on the 6th of December. And if you have any questions for either myself or Tracy, we'd love to keep this conversation going offline.
Thank you so much.